This is the Construction Leading Edge podcast from constructionleadingedge.com. My name is Todd DeWalt. I'm your host, and this is the podcast for construction business owners and leaders. This podcast episode is an interview with Dan Harbin. He's the founder and owner of Redwood Builders, general contractor located just outside of San Francisco, California. Dan just recently made the leap and started his business full-time, and we're going to talk about several topics, including how he picked the niche market that he's in, how he decided that it was the right time to take the leap and go out on his own, how Dan differentiates himself from the competition. We're going to talk about how he markets his business. We'll also talk about the most educational mistake that he's made so far, and then what is his number one challenge right now. So we're going to get into that interview in just a minute, but before we do that, let me ask you a question. A couple of questions. Is your crew working at peak efficiency? Do you find yourself often frustrated about their production, or maybe more precisely, their lack of production? Does it seem like your field employees are just not as productive as they should be? Maybe you know that your crews are not as productive as they should be, but you're just not where to start out. Where should you start? Well, if that's you, you're not alone, because the reality is we're in the middle of a productivity crisis in the construction industry. I travel around to a lot of different job sites, and I see it. I see a lack of production, which results in a lot of problems, delayed projects, losing money, which sets off a domino effect. It is a big problem. So what can we do about it? Well, I've put together a 3-part video series with some simple, often no-cost strategies that you can use to improve your crew's productivity and profitability. Now, these are not just theories. These are not the rantings of a madman. These are strategies that I have used personally, and I can tell you from my experience, they are game changers. I've used these, and they are game changers. I guarantee it. So when you watch these videos with productivity tips, here's what you're going to learn. You're going to learn the number one productivity killer according to a 2012 study and what you can do to beat it, how to avoid double handling and damaging materials once they are delivered to the site. You'll learn about the McDonald's rule and how it can help you. You'll learn about 2 activities that could be costing you $73 per day per employee. The one question that you need to ask your crews every day that will make you money. You'll learn about how you may be going about delegation completely wrong. And last but not least, you'll learn the best way to starve a horse. That's right. The best way to starve a horse. So to sign up to receive these free videos, go to constructionleadingedge.com/productivity. That's constructionleadingedge.com/productivity. Hit the red button there that says, yes, I want to sign up. Put your email address in, and I will send you those videos to your email box. Now let's get to that interview with Dan Harbin. All right, Dan Harbin, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Todd. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. So we've swapped some emails over the past few months, and I think you've got a really interesting story. You're at a place in your business that a lot of people are at, or you just made a jump that a lot of people are looking forward to making. So I'm looking forward to this. Been looking forward to this conversation. I think it's going to help a lot of people. So if you would tell us a little bit about your background, what you were doing for the last few years, and tell us about the jump you made just recently.
All right. I've been working as a project manager for larger commercial construction companies in the kind of the Northern California Bay Area for the past few years. And I've been working on getting my own company started for about the past 2 years. And just recently I made the jump on to going full-time on my own. So I've made the transition from kind of a project manager into owning my own business, getting my own jobs, and running my own projects.
Gotcha. So what sort of work are you doing right now with your business?
Well, right now I'm focusing on a niche that I kind of carved out for myself up here in the Northern California area. I'm primarily doing accessory dwelling units and small residential structures. A good part of my background is also in tenant improvement, but I found it kind of difficult to go that route and get in touch with landlords or leasing agents and get in front of that. But I found that I got a lot of traction going towards accessory dwellings because they're fairly popular in my area right now.
So accessory dwellings, explain what that is exactly.
Well, it's basically a granny unit. That's a pretty common term, or an in-law suite. If you have a certain size lot, you can essentially build a second unit behind your house or even attach it to your house that has its own separate utilities. You can lease it out. Your family member can live there. You can just use it for an office. It all depends on kind of the local jurisdiction, your local zoning regulations. But it's a good way to add square footage for less than the cost of obviously building a whole new house.
Gotcha. What made you decide to go that route?
Well, around my area, there's not really any contractors that kind of specialized in accessory dwelling units, and it seems like there's so many contractors. Either in California, either everyone is a contractor, they know a contractor, they're related to a contractor, or they already have a contractor. So, for me, going on my own, in order to get myself noticed, I thought, I better find something that I can kind of specialize in or focus on. And I've always kind of liked small structures. I think they're kind of interesting from an architectural standpoint. It's a good use of space. They're very efficient. And, around here, there's a lot of people, maybe their kids are moving back in with them or their parents are moving in with them. And real estate is so expensive in California. Not everyone has $750,000 kicking around to buy another house. So these, building a second unit is kind of a good solution to have families either live together but still have their own space, or, for people that want to have maybe a vacation rental on their property, make a little extra income. So for me, I just thought, hey, let's focus on that and see where it takes me. And it's working out pretty well so far.
Gotcha. And you just recently made the jump from this being a side gig to this being your full-time gig. How recent was this jump?
Well, it's about 2 weeks old now, Todd. It's very recent to go full-time. I've been working on it for about a year and a half, but I just made the full commitment, and I'm pretty excited about it. So
yeah, I'm sure that's definitely an exciting time. So we had an interesting conversation around the question of when do you know it's the right time to make the jump? Because some people would say you just need to jump. Some people would say all the conditions need to be just right, that there is a right time. Talk to us about what was your thought process around it, and what made you decide to walk away from your other job and decide to focus on this full time?
Okay. Well, in my opinion, I don't think there's really the perfect time, and I feel like I could have waited for things to be, maybe a little bit better, or, have a few more projects lined up. Essentially, for me, it could partly be the season, but I had a few opportunities kind of present themselves to me, kind of right at once, where I could take 3 projects and have them all kind of lined up, and it got to the point where if I said yes to all those projects, there's no way I could do my own, my other job full time and do these. I would fail, and I didn't want to fail. So I said, I've got this kind of head pressure, if you will, of jobs. I've got kind of a backlog, so I'm just going to pull the ripcord and go for it. It's definitely stressful. I'm not going to say it was a really easy decision, but the market is really hot in California. And I felt like it's now or never, and I wanted to go for it before we kind of went back into the winter downturn season. I've been kicking this around for about a year and a half, and so I did have everything already set up and ready to go, so almost like a turnkey company. And that really helps because I was essentially, prepped and ready to where, on Monday, if I said I'm going to go on my own, Tuesday, I had my website up, I had my license, my insurance, I had everything ready to go, so I didn't have any downtime in the interim.
So it sounds like you did some due diligence. What sort of research did you do before you decided, well, maybe not just before you decided to make the jump, but over the past year and a half, what was your thought process? What were the things that you were researching let's put it this way, what were you most concerned about when it came to making the jump to doing this full time?
Well, I guess for me, I was most concerned about the areas of my background that are a kind of lack experience in. Like I've always been on the project management side of things. I've never been an estimator. I've estimated change orders and done stuff within projects I've worked on in the past, but I've never been a full estimator. So that's my main kind of stress point, if you will, is that I need to improve my skill set for estimating. And that was actually kind of another reason why I wanted to go towards the accessory dwelling, small structures, because none of the contracts are too big, so I can't really get myself in too much trouble. Right. Even if I do make a mistake, it's not going to be, it's not going to sink me, which is good. But that was definitely, kind of a stress point for me, is not knowing if I was fully ready. But you learn a lot by doing, and I figured I'll just get in the trenches and talk to as many people as I can, make as many connections as I can, and just try to learn as I go, and hopefully minimize the mistakes I make.
So, were you able to find some mentors or some folks who were experienced in the home building industry that you could get some advice from? Well,
that's kind of a tough thing, because I couldn't really go to my coworkers. I didn't feel like at the office where I was working and say, hey, I'm going to go on my own. What do you guys think? It wasn't really that environment. Funny enough, I did listen to a lot of construction podcasts. I listened to every single one of the Construction Leading Edge podcasts. So I kind of did a binge on trying to research and listen to anyone else who had started a company. I read things online, just listen to basically anyone who had a story that I could hear what path they took, and see if they had any mistakes that they made that they could, give me pointers on. I just kind of built it step by step.
Makes sense. What's one topic that you were trying to find some information on, but you just couldn't find it? It just wasn't out there. Is there anything that falls into that category?
Yeah, a big one for me, and this is kind of I don't know, it's kind of a bummer, but the profit, like the whatever market you're in, kind of has I think a profit rate, and a part of it's tied to your overhead, but then there's also just kind of what the market would bear, and that information is next to impossible to find. So it's hard to kind of figure out where you can price yourself in the market to be competitive, but not price yourself out of work and not underprice things, which is really going to hurt. So to me, that was that is still a bit of a mystery, and I'm kind of tracking towards it. But I felt that, that was difficult, because most people aren't just going to say, oh yeah, here you go, here's my books, check it out, unless you have an uncle or something that does the same business you're in. So that's kind of a black box, and I would love it if I could, pick someone's brain on that category.
Yeah. So you mentioned that estimating is kind of a stressor, and pricing is kind of a mystery at times. So what's your thought process when you're pricing a job? If you could just walk us through how you think about pricing a job and the factors that you consider before you give that number to the prospect.
Right. Well, I've done it a couple different ways here. I'm kind of experimenting a little bit and part of that has to do with what kind of contract I have with the project owner. I've been experimenting a little bit by doing a cost plus contract. So if the scope, especially with homeowners, the scope can be kind of vague. Sometimes some people have drawings, permit sets, they're ready to go. It's pretty straightforward. You can bid it out. But other people want to meet you and just kind of walk around and say, I want to do this and that. So part of my process early on is trying to evaluate the client and see if this is going to be something that's going to be, worth my time as a business owner, to be able to, some job that's really going to happen that I can make a profit from, or is it going to take way too much work up front to even get to a number that the homeowner might then be shocked by. So if there's any way I can get a rough budget idea out of them, I like to do that. And then also try to evaluate the person. And then after I get through that step, if it's something that's really vague, I've had a few successful jobs where I have done cost plus, where I give them basically my fee, and I almost act as a construction manager, GC, and then all the subcontract costs or any self-perform work would just be passed through. And what's nice about that for me starting off is I really don't have any risk involved in that. So that's nice. I'm only going to make so much money, but I also don't really have the downside of underestimating something or, being way off on my bid and then having to cover that.
Yeah. Are you finding, is that unusual in the residential industry? I know it's fairly typical in the commercial side, but how is that received by your clients?
Well, a few people think it's great. It kind of depends person by person. Some people go, "Oh, this is great," because it seems transparent to them. Mm-hmm. And, as the scope shifts, the budget will shift. And I try to give them a rough order of magnitude. Like, this will be between 35 and 65 grand, and here's my fee, or something like that, just as an example. So they're not totally blindsided by it. But it's been well received so far. And for me, it works out well because it also gives me a chance to kind of feel out the market on the subcontractor side with their pricing, and just kind of almost use these jobs as learning tools along the way while reducing my risk. So it's working out well for me. I know that a lot of residential guys will that have a lot more experience than me can come in and just look at a house and say, "Oh yeah, I'm shooting from the hip. This is going to be 50 grand," and they've got it covered, and they know their margins and they know what things cost. But since I'm not there yet, I thought, I would try this cost plus proposition and see if I could sell it, and it seems to be working.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So you mentioned you like to, I don't know if you use this phrase, but you want to qualify your prospects. You want to make sure you don't waste time with them. So what are the red flags for you that say this person is a tire kicker or they're just a waste of time?
Well, I went to one person's house a few weeks back, and they had, one project, and they wanted me to bid it 3 different ways, and every next sentence was something else, like, "Oh well, this wall should stay, and I want exterior siding, but I also want it to maybe be an interior wall." So, they're very not very focused. They're kind of all over the place. The point and look people, if you will, where they just want to come out and kind of wave their arms and explain it to you. I think for some people that are, a lot more experienced than me, or the kind of people that maybe, if you're a contractor that, you have a truck, you're doing all the work yourself, that might be a great job because, it could last a long time and, it could be a lucrative job for you. Someone like me who's trying to stack up jobs, run a few at a time, and be as efficient as possible. I need someone who's got a pretty clear definition of their scope of work. So if someone wants to keep me there for an hour and a half just talking about one wall, I know pretty quickly that that's probably not going to be a very efficient job going forward. So I try to, I'm polite, but I try to explain to people maybe perhaps I'm too busy for that work, or maybe if they get further along, they can contact me. But I just try to feel out their personality, I guess.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. How are you generating leads? How are you getting prospects?
Mostly right now it's coming through Facebook and my website, especially residential side. My Facebook account is a very simple page, but it actually gets more traffic than my website. Part of that is because I'm working on Google SEO right now to try to get my website more searchable. There's a few other contractors with my same name who've been established longer. There's a landscape contractor, for example, that's Redwood Builders, that comes up usually ahead of me, which is confusing. But my Facebook page pops up, so I think I get more traffic through there. And then just having tiny house, accessory dwelling, granny unit, those kind of keywords available on my website and my social media to search gets customers to me, which is good.
So what's your strategy on Facebook to get traffic? Are you posting pictures of projects? What are you doing to get interest?
I am doing that. It's a little anemic right now, but by the end of this month, I'll have a few more things to post. But yeah, I'm posting things. Also, there's been some laws in California that have relaxed the restrictions on accessory dwelling units. So whenever there's a milestone or an article about that, I'll link it to my Facebook page and say, hey, if you're interested in this, give me a call. I've become an expert on the local zoning, and I can get your project through. A lot of customers in my niche, I think, just automatically assume, it's a red tape, I can't do it, it's too hard. And it's really actually pretty straightforward as long as you have, if you meet a few criteria. And I've basically created a checklist for the kind of the major areas in my work area. So if someone calls and I can say, oh, you're in this county, you need X, Y, and Z, and if you meet that, then we'll take the next step. So I'm just working to promote the idea that it is doable, and to just contact me for a consultation to make the first step.
Makes sense. So if you had to pick where to spend your energy, whether it was Facebook, Instagram, your website, whatever other digital outlet there is, which would you double down on?
I think for me, for the accessory dwelling unit and granny unit work, I think social media is the key, because it gets directly into homeowners, and people that are interested in this sort of thing. I've also I'm interested in Instagram. I don't have an Instagram account yet, but I've heard that's a really good way to get out there, especially when you have some photos of some good looking projects. So I think that's my next step. So my plan is to focus on Facebook, Instagram, social media, and then obviously tie back to my website. But I think those areas are going to be best for me. I'm also looking to get into some Google ratings, which one of your previous guests talked about, and I think that would be good for my business. And a lot of my customers are happy and excited about their projects, so I think that would be an easy way for me to kind of boost my traffic.
Yeah, it also seems to be a good way to differentiate yourself and grab the low-hanging fruit, and it seems like something that a lot of contractors aren't doing very well. So yeah, Google reviews. You're referring to Jonah Cantor, who talked about how he built his business over in Charleston, South Carolina, doing that. So yeah,
yes,
that was really sharp. Good idea there. Speaking of differentiating yourself, so you picked a niche of accessory dwelling units. You're trying to differentiate yourself on Facebook. What else?
Mm-hmm.
You're a startup. You're a one-man show. You're going up against entrenched contractors who weathered the recession. So the ones who survived are pretty strong. How else are you planning to differentiate yourself?
Well, so I came from a commercial background that was very customer oriented. We did a lot of negotiated work, a lot of private work. So I'm trying to take some of the skills I learned on the commercial side that were very customer facing, customer service oriented, and apply them in this kind of residential market, which, not to knock anybody, but a lot of times you'll get people that won't even call you back, or they'll string you along, or they'll show up with a cigarette in their mouth and, sunglasses on, and they're not the most professional people. So my thought is to try to be as professional, as courteous, and polite as possible, and to really, give my customers the best experience that I'm able to give them, and just the most professional and smooth experience that I can, and try to kind of pull the contractor stereotype, out of their grasp and replace it with something that's a clean cut professional person that's a good communicator that can, help them get the job done and not, overpromise and underdeliver and all the bad things you hear about contractors. So my focus is really to try to just provide a great customer service experience if I can.
Are there any other tools or skills that you see that you learned on the commercial side that are really beneficial on the residential side, and maybe some of your competition isn't doing, other than the things you just talked about?
Well, there's lots of software out there to use that makes the experience really easy. One thing I do is I set up weekly project meetings because I'm only doing 2 or 3 projects at a time. So I have half an hour once a week to go and meet with the owner face to face and just review schedule, go over what's happening, what has happened, and that way, if some reason there's a breakdown in communication, we can resolve it right there. And I'm not sure that many of my colleagues take the time to do that, and I find that a really effective tool. And it makes you look really responsible. Is if you show up someplace on time once a week, it's not that hard to do, and I think it goes a really long way towards communication.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, and I would agree. I think most people are probably not having weekly progress meetings with their clients. That's a great idea. Is there anything else that you've carried over from your commercial experience and you're applying it now?
Well, I don't know. I guess not.
But maybe it may be hard for you to know because you're just doing it the way you always knew it. But I would say the communication, the progress meetings, the timeliness, just the standard operating procedure from a commercial side is probably a little different than what the typical residential contractor is doing. So, good stuff. Let me shift gears. Let's talk about, I know you made the jump just a few weeks ago, but what's the most educational mistake you've made so far?
Well, for me, it was early on when I was forming my company. I didn't do enough research as to the differences between, having a sole proprietorship, an LLC, an S corp, just a regular corporation, because they all have different kind of legal definitions, and they all have different restrictions. And I actually, got my license and then formed an LLC. And then, when I went to go get my insurance, they said, oh, well, since you're an LLC, that's kind of a new thing in California for an LLC to be able to get a contractor's license. It's only a few years old. They require a pretty heavy bond, whether you have a project or not, and it's a cash bond you have to pay. So I had to put the brakes on and say, well, wait a minute, I don't have $50,000 just to park somewhere for a bond to support this LLC that has no business yet. So I had to kind of backtrack, dissolve that, and I ended up going and forming an S corp, which was just pretty much the standard. You have your normal insurance, and you can bond projects if you want, but they're not required. And that was a few months setback for me. It cost me a couple $1,000s, and that was a painful mistake. And that was mostly just because I think I was really eager to get started, and I said, oh yeah, LLC, that's the way to go to limit my liability, and I didn't do the research that I should have done. So that was pretty painful, and it took me a little while to correct.
Yeah. I found when you go through a process for the first time, whether it's working in a new city or working with a new client or starting a business, first time you go through the process, there's lots of bumps along the way, and you figure everything out the hard way. Sometimes
absolutely.
Sometimes it's actually the best way to figure stuff out. It's just to charge ahead. Know you're going to make some mistakes. You're going to take 4 steps forward and 1 step back. But even then, you're still better off by moving forward rather than sitting back and waiting, like we were talking about, waiting for the right time, waiting for all the cards to be turned face up and all of that.
Right.
Because that usually, well, that hardly ever happens. Let's put it that way.
Right. I agree. I think you can wait and wait and wait. And, you really, in order to make it happen, you have to push hard. You have to believe in yourself, and you have to just go for it. I mean, I think if you talk to other entrepreneurs or you listen to other podcasts out there, that there's plenty of them that people are talking about starting up their own business, not necessarily construction, but any business. The common thread that I found is everybody just jumps all in at one point. No one is really sure. And everybody just seems like, at some point they just say, this is it, I'm taking the leap. And it is a leap. And they go for it. And, you just have to hope that it works out. I think if you work hard and keep at it and try to work as smart as you can, I think you'll have success.
Yeah. So there's kind of a philosophy behind successful entrepreneurs. And I'm not to say that all entrepreneurs who jump are successful, but that is a common thread that I've heard among all the people I've interviewed. Like the very first guy I interviewed, Torrey Hawkins, the guy started a construction company in 2008, right in the middle of the recession. And
right.
he talked about burning the boats and like literally getting out on a limb and sawing it off, eliminating plan B. And the idea of not having a plan B, that's pretty stressful to me. But when you don't have a plan B and there's no option, then you have to make that thing work. And there's something to be said for eliminating plan B and forcing yourself to be successful.
Absolutely. I agree. And, that's kind of putting yourself in that position when your back's kind of against the wall. It's always amazing how much you can accomplish and what you can really do. And I think that, if you just, have a positive attitude, do your research, don't be foolish about it, but try to do your research. I would say, line everything up that you can, that takes time, especially things like your website, and your license and your business. If you can have all that up and running before, I think you're going to be, ready to go. And then it's just finding jobs and performing work and, trying to have success.
Yeah, just kind of the blocking and tackling, generate leads, close deals, execute the work, collect the money, rinse and repeat.
Exactly, exactly.
So one of the things I have a theory that some of the biggest hurdles to starting a business are internal hurdles. They're mindset, fears, limiting beliefs, mindset type stuff. What if anything like that did you face when you started your business? Were there certain things that you were stressed about, like things that you didn't think were possible? Like what sort of mindset issues or challenges did you bump up against in this process?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I would say that every day I have a little bit of a mini roller coaster that goes on inside my head, where I'm going, oh, this is the greatest thing, and then, oh boy, here we go. I'm pretty much the sole breadwinner for my family. I have a daughter and a wife, and my income essentially supports the household. So for me, leaving a well-paying job where I know the paycheck's going to be there, kind of forging into the unknown, was always in the back of my mind, and still is, oh man, you're really taking a risk. But, for me, the potential upside outweighed the security of having that, that job with the paycheck. My other, kind of fear that I deal with occasionally is, what if this work right now is just a bubble and it dries up, but once you get out there, there's so much work, and especially in California, I think all over the country right now, that, as soon as you start telling people, hey, I'm a contractor, or I have a construction business, and, you'd be amazed how many people come back and say, oh, well, either I've got this, or my brother needs this done, or so-and-so. And it's amazing, the word of mouth, how fast it gets around and how many people are looking for work. And a lot of contractors are really busy out there. In our area, people will call 5 or 6 guys, and no one can even perform the work because everyone's booked out 3, 4 months, 5 months. So, to me, there's such a pent-up demand right now that this is an excellent time to enter the industry. Get in there, carve yourself a little niche if you can, and just keep lining up the jobs.
Sure. So there was some fear about making the jump, walking away from the steady paycheck. Like, do you find yourself, like, you're a relatively young guy, like, do you have concerns about your experience, your age, like competing against some of these older grizzled veterans? Is that something that ever comes up?
Yes, it is. Especially when I go to meet people, I'm not sure that I'm always what they expect. So, I just try to be as professional as I can, when I show up, and just, hopefully that's refreshing to people and not alarming to people that I'm, on the younger side. And, but yeah, it is. And I feel like, there's always people out there with more experience. It's not always the best experience, but, if people didn't do something because the next guy had more experience, nobody would ever start anything. You always have to start somewhere.
Right.
So, I think if you just try your best, be professional, and, maybe not bite off more than you can chew in the beginning, I think you can accumulate that experience over time, and before you know it, you'll be one of the experts as well, right alongside everybody else.
Yeah. So what are your goals? Have you set goals for yourself, for your business, for the short term, long term?
Well, I do have some loosely defined goals. I'd like to have a few employees before the end of this year. And by the end of next year, I'd like to have a certain volume of work. I haven't really had time, to be honest, to spell out a full-on kind of business plan with a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan where I'd like to be. I hope to get to that point at some point. But right now, my main goal is just to, get work in the door, have the jobs complete successfully, and, impress my customers so that hopefully they tell all their friends and I get more work from that. So really, most of my goals right now are immediate goals and short-term goals.
Yeah. No, I think that's a solid strategy. At this point in the game, you don't need to be worrying about stuff that's not generating cash flow. Really got to keep the main thing, which is get work, execute work, collect money, keep things rolling.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's smart. So, what are some of the challenges that you're facing right now that are between you and getting to the next level? There may be some things I can help you with. Maybe the rest of the Construction Leading Edge Nation can jump in and provide some advice too. So, is there anything that you're scratching your head about, or you're not sure how to approach that you could use some help or advice with?
Well, I think for me being a one-man show, it's scaling. I don't really want to turn down work, but I also don't want to take on so much work that I fail at that work. So finding a good way to scale without taking on too many people or some office employees, or getting my overhead too inflated. That's my main concern, I think, for the next few years, is just how to maintain like a nice arc, if possible, of growth without getting too big to where it hurts me, or it becomes a difficulty or something that I have to feed the beast because my company is too big. That to me, that's the challenge right now.
Yeah. So, yeah, and I talked to, I interviewed another guy, his name's David King, and he started a painting business maybe two or 3 years ago, and he's in a little different spot. I don't think he has any interest in hiring anybody else. I think he wants to keep it if he doesn't want to keep other people busy. So he's in a little bit different place. So yeah, that is an interesting place to be. How do you divvy up responsibilities? How do you get enough work to justify having somebody on board? How do you walk that fine line? So
right.
So you folks out there listening, I'm sure some of you have been through there. If you have thoughts on it, then send me an email, todd@constructionleadingedge.com, and then we'll have, I'll get it to Dan, or at the end of the podcast, we'll have an opportunity. Dan, if you want to give out some social media information for people to get in touch with you, hopefully they'll be able to share some advice with you. Anything else?
Yeah, that'd be fantastic.
Other than making that jump and growing your business, is there anything else that you're challenged with right now that we might be able to help you on?
I think besides figuring out a smart way to scale, I'm just focused on getting my work done. So I think that's it. And keeping my customers happy is my main goal and my main challenge, and I'm just working on that. So
makes sense. So speaking of keeping customers happy, you're having weekly meetings with them. You're being professional when you show up. Is there anything else that you're doing to try to provide a good customer service experience?
I like to provide schedules at the beginning of the job, and if things change, I just like to communicate as much as I can. So over communicate, I think is better than under communicating, and I think your clients will tell you if you're bugging them with too much communication. I think they'll let you know. I think that's always better than leaving things in the dark, because when you leave questions out there, people tend to wonder, and then they fill in the blank with whatever their maybe their worst nightmare is, and then in their problem there might be in their mind there might be a problem when there really isn't one, because you've left something open or a loose end. So I just try to communicate.
Makes sense. Yeah, that definitely that helps prevent people from developing their own narrative about things. And my experience has been if they don't have a narrative, if you don't provide the narrative, they'll come up with one, and it's going to be really bad, because you're a contractor and you're working on their house, and they immediately go to the worst case scenario.
Exactly. I always think of the movie The Money Pit. That's always been the classic example for me, and the contractors that show up there. I don't know if it's a pretty old movie, but it's a classic. It's definitely worth a watch if you're a contractor.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so let's talk about some leadership stuff, leadership and business influences. Do you have any book recommendations or anybody else that you follow who you've gleaned some good leadership or business advice or information from?
Well, for me, I'm been on the road a lot. I like to listen to a lot of podcasts. Like I said before, this podcast, Construction Leading Edge, has been huge for me. I've listened to every single episode. Just from an entrepreneurial standpoint, there's a podcast I've been listening to lately called How I Built This, and that's just stories about a lot of companies that are household names, and interviewing the people who started them and hearing their story about how they started in that first few years. And it's more inspirational, I think, than educational, but you do learn a few things, and it's just nice to hear other people's stories about their journey and how they made something from nothing usually. So that's what I've been doing lately, is just listening to podcasts.
Are you an audiobook listener?
Yes, at times I do listen to audiobooks. I've been on the road, like I said, a lot, so I will get a good audiobook in here and there.
Any recommendations?
Not really. The last one I listened to was just a fiction, so
Gotcha.
More just for pleasure.
All right. Was there anything else that either you are curious about? If there's a question that you've got for the group, anything else we might be able to help you with?
I would just say if you can keep up with the podcast and get as many people as you can in the door and on the air that can share their story, I think it helps all of us. It's been great for me, and I hope that a bunch of people can hear this and hopefully get some inspiration and just go for it.
Yeah, well that's my plan. So let's end with this. You've got a couple of minutes in front of a bunch of business owners and wannabe business owners. What would you say to them?
I would say do your best to make the construction industry look as good as you can, as professional as you can. And if you're considering going out on your own, now's a great time to do it. Do it. Make sure you have your homework done, and then take that leap.
Make a decision. Make the jump. Sounds good. Well,
absolutely.
Dan, where can people connect with you? Either on social media, your website. Where's the best place for people to get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can go to facebook.com/redwoodbuildersgc, or my website is redwoodbuildersgc.com. That's redwoodbuildersgc as in generalcontractor.com.
Got it. I'll have those links in the notes to the podcast. And I would encourage you guys, reach out to Dan. Let him know if this helped you. If you've got any advice for him, hit him up on Facebook, go to his website, and let him know what helped you. So, Dan, I appreciate it. Thanks for being on the podcast, and let me know if there's anything I could do to help you, man.
All right. It was my pleasure, Todd. Thank you very much.
All right. Hope you enjoyed that interview. Hope you got some nuggets out of that from Dan, especially if you're thinking about making the jump to start your own business, or if you are in the early stages of your business. So be sure to go to constructionleadingedge.com/056. This is episode 56 for the show notes. You'll also have links there that'll help you get in touch with Dan and anything else that we mentioned on the show. So head over to constructionleadingedge.com/056 for the show notes. Don't forget, if you want some productivity tips to make your crews more productive and profitable, head over to constructionleadingedge.com/productivity. Sign up for those free videos, and you will be on your way to helping your crew make you more money. Thanks for listening. My name is Todd DeWalt. I'll see you next time.